Vossy, for the first time in a few years, mate, we're having this chat in the very early days of September, which is not when you want to be having these kind of discussions. Given the fullness of the campaign now, what would your top-level summary of 2025 be?
Oh, the top-level summary is huge disappointment. It's been a hard campaign. It feels like it's lacked any sort of momentum from very early on. Disappointing because, coming in from the pre-season felt really positive about what the pre-season we had. The level of detail, the energy that was in the group, the training standards, right throughout pre-season was as good as it's been. Probably the best it's ever been, to be fair, coming into the season. So had a pretty big hiccup in round one, and obviously not being able to play out that second half was a costly one, and not being able to get that traction and being 0-4 certainly did impact us and our start to the season. And it sort of felt like we were just in the grind for most of it after that. I got close to being able to recover it by getting even with the ledger, and then that started to slip away from us as well. And as throughout the season, either through game style, we're trying to continue to evolve and adapt, but also through injury. The team was changing and probably didn't have the personnel that we needed out there to be able to have the impact on the season we needed. So finished with on a positive note. But most of it was largely described as probably disappointing and certainly lacking momentum.
It is still pretty fresh and pretty raw, but has the last week and a bit provided the chance for reflection of the campaign as a whole, and what have been some of your other key takeaways?
Well, the main takeaway for us has been the emergence of some of your younger players. That's been well and truly noted. I think about, again, their start of their pre-season campaign, and from day one, I think they were energised by some opportunities at the back end of that year. They certainly went to work on their game, certainly their physical profile, and came back and made an immediate impact. That was going to be needed because the reality was they were going to be the emergence of our depth, and if we're going to grow that out, then we need them to be able to develop their games. And early part of the season, they certainly did that in the VFL. I think that their approach through that period of time, even though they weren't playing their best, was important. The development coaches and the time they spent with them was really important. And then sort of around that, probably round 8-ish to after the bye, they sort of just started to all collectively improve their game and started to make a player at a position in the team. And as those roles opportunities came, they got more game time and sort of started to feel like we were. That they were building their energy, and they finished off the season really strong. So even in the exits last week, a lot of them were hoping that the season went for another 6 weeks, and I appreciate that they were excited by that. But I was also happy enough for the season to finish. So look, and that has been one of the real positives come out of the year.
For a number of weeks, you mentioned how the sole focus was on finishing 2025 strong, despite how the campaign transpired. Is there still a bit of a sense of pride that, despite all the noise, the team was still able to finish in that way, as you outlined?
I still believe that there's courage in being able to begin again, and that's certainly the approach that we had to take. We were forced to take. Obviously, we had the visibility on what the season was going to look like for us. So you can either sort of sit in that and wallow in that, or you can do something about it. The team took a different tack to the way we wanted to approach the locker room, how we wanted our environment to be, and they attacked it pretty hard. So, it was their leaders' job to be able to get in behind some of our younger players, not rob them of the experience of developing, that our leaders need to be there beside them and have their backs. And, if they're going to get better and make our depth better and grow as a football team, that we needed this period of time to be able to play out the season strong. It is also a really important trait that every club has that does well, and that's never giving up. So, we really took on that mantra towards the end of the season that we're going to play every single minute of this year, where that was every single minute of a game. We highlighted the acts at the end of games that probably didn't necessarily make a difference in the result of the game, but was going to be important to us. What were the winning behaviours we needed to be able to see through that period of time? And fortunately, I was able to see a heap of highlights through those periods of games where late in games maybe the scoreboard had got away, or we were far enough in front where it didn't matter, but we sort of still saw what those efforts were. So that was important to highlight amongst the group, as well as it was to play out in the season. But I think collectively we took a position that it was an opportunity to go into discovery mode. Let's find out what's going to make us better. What are the things that are holding us back, but also be quite pointed on what are the things that are going to change us moving forward. And so the guys really dialed into that. We've got a lot of evidence now that we can go to work on, and it'll certainly help us provide the direction on what we need to do throughout this off-season and pre-season.
Can you take us into what your message was to the playing group in that final team meeting before they headed off for their off-season?
Most of it's still probably about that. It's we still have to look at the season in its totality, and we've got to be able to not get lost in the emotion of it all, and we've got to find out what's the evidence that we have and what's real and what's not. And we talk about that a lot, but it's important to dial into facts. And the facts say that in the early parts of the year, the slight little tinkers that we had throughout pre-season and the way we wanted to be able to play, we're getting some good traction. We're moving the ball end to end better than we ever have. We were playing a forward of centre game better than we ever have, which was in the top few in the competition. We were getting inside 50s, and the supply, the differential between them and us was as good as it's ever been. But the cold hard reality, despite all that, is that we weren't finishing our plays, and so most people were making it about our entire ball movement, but the reality it was about how we finished our last kick inside 50, and then obviously what our shots on goal and the opportunities we took. So despite us trying to change that, we couldn't change it to the level that we needed to. And so we have to look at those facts, and we've got to dial into what worked there and what didn't. And but clearly the evidence still comes out that we've got work to do when it comes to the efficiency in our game.
You've touched on it a bit there. How do you balance up the more improved signs that were shown in the last month without sugarcoating where things also fell short across the course of the campaign?
With just great balance, because it'll really help us know what we need to almost double down on, and I'll speak about that a little bit, and what things we did do over the pre-season and throughout the season that made a difference. But we've also got to have more depth and then our efficiency, and errors and efficiency was a big thing throughout the season, and we couldn't change that storyline as much as what we wanted to. So that'll something that we'll absolutely look at really closely. We feel like we've got a good grasp on what that will actually look like for us moving forward. But before what we do next, we're going to have some changes in our coaching department. We're going to have change in our GM. So we'll probably take that step back, and then when we reconvene, we'll start to obviously look at what that needs to look like moving forward.
You spoke about how it was a frustrating year, but I'm sure there's not much more joy you can get as a coach as 7 AFL debutants, which is the club's most since 2017, and also 3 Rising Star nominations with the news of Matt Carroll late last week.
And all of them are just, got their own unique storyline. But what needs to be stated is they have earned that right. You can get your opportunity through one of a couple of ways. You either, there's an injury and you're waiting for your turn to be able to come in and, take your spot, and that's how you get your opportunity and you step up there. Or you can actually play so well that you force your way in above others. And I would say in almost every instance that they've come in and through their performance been able to earn the right. Having Harry come in with what he did and where he started and what we thought we'd get out of his year, we sort of thought it'd just be a year of just playing VFL football and growing out his game. And I mean, look at the size of him. He's tall, but he's not very big. And but such was his craft and his game understanding and the level that he was playing at, he just demanded the spot. So then you're sort of like looking at it going, well, we just have to play him. Like it's for us to be able to get better as a group, we have to be able to play. We have to get him in the team. So that was great to see. And obviously, Matty Carroll has come from literally nowhere. I think about his journey and what he was doing last year. I mean, he literally fell asleep in one of my meetings in the first few weeks. So I know that story's been well told, but that is his nickname, and he's never going to live that down. But he doesn't seem to care. But that's how far back he was coming. The intensity of the daily training and having to back up session after session was too much for him. So to see that guy turn into this half back, bouncing off the back line, tough over the football, going back with the flight of the ball, play out 120 minutes of football. He's now got another level of understanding of the detail that's required, the intensity you need to be able to play AFL football at, the weekly grind that you have to be able to get into. And when you sort of see the way that he goes about it, it's hard not to play him.
And then you mentioned 7 AFL debutants for the season, and top draft pick from last year, Jagger Smith, is injured for the whole year. Ben Camporelli has a month suspension at the business end of the season, so it could have been even more.
Yeah, well, I said to Ben in his exit, so you're not going to like this, mate. I said, but we considered playing in that last game, and with Cooper being out coming in, I sort of felt like it probably wasn't the right thing to do for him and for us. So he probably didn't like me saying that, because everyone wants their chance to be able to shine. So, but we've really loved what Campo done in the back half of this year. He's really tough. He knows he's got some things to work on his game. So you're right. He's one player that we'd sort of expect that would figure prominently across pre-season and then early into next year. And obviously Jagger throughout the year, watching his year, it's been a tough one for him. He will be a far better version of himself when he returns for us. But he's such an impressive young man. You can really tell that he's going to sit comfortably in leadership eventually, and you certainly don't want to put it on one particular individual, but it's fair to say I think he'll make a pretty significant difference to us.
When you look at that younger core, how important is it having guys like George Hewitt and Nick Haynes who perform the way they did this year, but also mentoring that emerging group on game day and in training?
Well, out of both of those guys, we got far more than what I thought we'd get throughout this year. Hainesy, we hoped to obviously figure prominently throughout the year, and the trust he had immediately with Weeders and that back six, he just fitted in so seamlessly, and he built trust over that pre-season, and he had a rough start, but I saw enough to know that he was going to work his way through that, and and sometimes through those moments, it's really important to be able to back people in, because you can have a bad day, you can have a bad moment, but that doesn't define you. And he probably had that bad day, he had that bad moment. But what he's been able to do since, unquestionably, his response has been incredibly impressive. There's probably a couple of games he shouldn't have played, and he played through it. He's just tough as well. He wants to be out there. He's a great teammate. So he's been a huge plus for us. And George's journey's been a bit different, because he was somewhat challenged at the beginning of this year about his role in the team and how prominently he would figure in it. And in typical George style, he just went about his business and just don't get in his way. And he was just dogged determination to be able to improve himself. And I don't think there's another person that puts more detail into the way that he prepares, how he prepares his body and how he prepares for games. And as a result, his level of consistency was really impressive. And what I hope with George is that his voice grows within this group. And but his year's been particularly impressive. And I'd imagine, without knowing what's happened, but in terms of best and fairest, I'd imagine they'd be sitting very, very prominent throughout the best and fairest night. You
mentioned a few weeks ago that there's clear signs of advancement as a club when young players start to compete with the more senior guys in the team. Not to crystal ball too far into the future, but how much will you challenge everyone to channel that hunger going forward?
Well, you can look at it, I spoke about this before, you can look at seasons two ways. You can sort of be hurt by that, and if that's what motivates you, then so be it. Or it can make you hungry. Now, for our older players, I think they'll probably have a mixture of both. For our younger players, though, I'd imagine there's a lot of hunger. So when you get that sort of feel and you sort of know what it tastes like, it can motivate you to be able to new levels. And in reality, that's how we get better. There was a decision made at the end of last year that our group needed to be more durable, and we needed to be able to go a different direction. So we made that decision. In obviously being able to grow, at least a lot of young players come in, but through the course of the year and developing their skill and being patient with them, they become mainstays in our group. But that is what's going to propel us forward. So how our list evolves and how it grows is on the back of the emergence of younger players being able to test older players for their positions. And so what I'm looking forward to is sort of seeing where that challenge exists throughout our pre-season. And yeah, so for us, there'll be a laser focus on on those players and where do we get our internal growth from. But obviously, clearly we've got to add to that mix as well.
That might be point one in your list, but how else does this team and club as a whole improve going forward?
Oh, I think having a consistency of our approach is still got to be the way forward. Look, when sometimes I talk, I sort of look at it and go, well, you know, what comes out seems quite positive, but at the same time, don't mistake that for that we aren't extremely disappointed and aren't hurt by what's happened. We've got to have a very real look at what's actually happened and what's going to help us moving forward. But you know, the reality is that we've got a needle shift in some few areas. Our training environment has been as good as it's ever been. I can't fault our boys wanting to get into this environment and wanting getting better every day, getting better every single day. You know, whether we're getting PBs in the gym, which we had late in the year. You know, so it shows you can still improve even after round 18. You can still get a little bit better in the gym. You can still be you know, have detail in the way you train and have intent with the way you train. And we saw that throughout the year, how, you know, just that focus on our training and being able to make that right, we were able to finish the year out really strong. So you can take positives out of that. But what we haven't been able to do is we haven't been able to consistently execute. And, you know, our season had a familiar storyline, get out a long way in front. And then, you know, our energy, concentration dropped. And, you know, teams would fight their way back in, and we weren't able to play that for 120 minutes. So there's, you know, is that efficiency, is that concentration to be able to maintain intensity through 120 minutes? Is there another level of capacity and fitness that we need to be able to build within our group? So there'll be a few factors that go into that, but, you know, another 12 months within this program and training under our high performance with Readiness and Dan James, our head of medical, they're leading a great program. So some more exposure to that will put us in a better place.
It was a big week for the footy club last week in terms of announcements, confirming the departures of Jack and Tom, as well as the club choosing to part ways with 3 players and members of the football staff. What's your message to Carlton fans, firstly, in regards to the playing group side of things and how that's going to look in 2026?
Well, that'll still continue to evolve, but it's all done with progress in mind. You know, clearly the first 2 that you highlighted there, we would have loved to have been able to continue involvement, but they've sort of exercised their rights under free agency and they've decided to go to another place. And, you know, through the natural evolution of our list, there's always going to be the guys that miss out. Some of those are really well-loved individuals. You talk about even someone like Harry Lemmy, you know, just a great character and around the place. You know, Razio the same. You know, they're just, you know, I don't want to pull individuals out, but, you know, they're just great people around the place and they're going to be missed. But we also acknowledge that there needs to be progress. And what I will say is that decisions moving forward that we will make will be always with Carlton first in mind. And so we'll make sure that what we do this for is for Carlton, and we'll be doing it with Carlton first, and those decisions will be front and centre when it comes to what we need to do next.
There is plenty of talk at this time of year by default, and I guess even more so when Charlie Curnow's name is the one that gets brought up. What's your stance on that commentary that's taken place in recent weeks? Yeah,
there's been a lot of commentary, but we're pretty clear on where it stands, and that's he'll be playing for Carlton in 2026. So, we can probably save a coffee for other coaches and, probably confirm that he'll be here. So, he's really important to us. Acknowledge amongst all the boys that we've had a challenging year. Charlie himself has had a really challenging year. Probably didn't really get going throughout the pre-season for one reason or another. A lot of that out of his control. Not much he could do, but probably missing Harry for most of the year didn't help. In terms of just having that person beside him that can help him. That partnership was changing all the time. We would have liked some stability there. It was Kempy, and then he got hurt, and we're waiting for the emergence of Hutto, and there's a little bit of Tom de Koning, and so we had a big mix down there. We probably couldn't settle on the combination that we need down there, but they're important for us, really important for us moving forward. But there seems to be an appetite to be able to raise a lot of our players' names when it comes to trade, and that's clearly, obviously, their right to do that. But it's also our right to obviously say that they're very important players to us, and they'll continue to be Carlton people.
Chris Davies was announced as the club's new GM of football. What will he provide to the footy club, and what do you say is his strengths?
Well, Chris worked with for 6-7 years at Port Adelaide. Very measured, and he's obviously very experienced and well regarded within the industry. And I think because he's quite measured and pragmatic in the way he sees things, he'll be a really important sounding board and obviously a critical leader, as GM of footballs are for our football club. So he brings that wealth of experience. What I've always loved about Chris is he always brings that real sense of urgency, get it done now attitude, but just has a great way of being able to still provide that support and care for his people, and that's pretty hard to do. But he is a guy that you sort of feel like, I want to do well for you. I don't want to let you down. So he has that sort of feel about him as a person or a leader that you just don't want to let Chris Davies down. So you do want to do well for him, and you always feel like he's got your back. So that was a really important and will be a really significant announcement for our club.
He'll play a key role in revamping the football department, which will have a new look next year, particularly with those coaching changes that I mentioned. When will you start to pick up discussions with him about shaping that group heading into 2026?
Well, I already have. So it's look, it's only surface level at the moment, but clearly a lot of discussions have been happening with Righty and myself to this point in time. So we've spent a fair bit of time together over this last little period of time trying to navigate that. But I like what we said, and we maintain pretty true to it, is that the end of the season was the most important part. That needed to play out first. I've got to absolutely commend our people for the way they went about things in the last 5-6 weeks of the season. I mean, there was an incredible amount of noise that could have taken us off in all different directions, but yet we maintained our focus and what we need to be able to do, and we're encouraged to be able to keep our eyes in and make sure we finish out the season as strong as we possibly can. But with that, we've obviously had to park some conversations, and we've obviously picked that up pretty quickly after the season's finished. So now that obviously the week's gone and the players are gone, and obviously we've made some decisions around some coaches who aren't going to be there. Obviously the eyes now go into, well, what does that need to look like, and what coaches are going to be here, and the people that can support our program. So, Chris obviously figures pretty prominently within all that.
This time last year, you mentioned that the durability side of things was something the club would really be going after. At this early stage, what does the off-season look like for the club, given the change that's already unfolded?
Well, I can say this now. We have been really unlucky with our injuries. It's been a year like any other. I mean, Jagger and Harry are first to pick ACLs, and Walshy with stressy, and Kotz with navicular, and Newman with a patella tendon. We've just had a really bad run of luck when it comes to trauma. But what the boys have done is that the program around our soft tissue program and what the guys have done there was obviously clearly where we need to make a difference. So what Rob and Dan have done in that space has been, amazing. And it's made a huge difference to us, and the results say so. And it doesn't take just a great program, it takes great intent from a playing group to get that right. So both of those have come together, and fortunately we've been able to get some great results on that. But what we have got, unfortunately through bad luck or otherwise, we've obviously had a bit unlucky in a couple of other areas. So I'm hoping that settles. It looks like that most of the guys that have been impacted in some form will get a pretty big pre-season under their belt, so that's important. So the guys like Matty and Cottrell and obviously Jagger and a couple of those guys, they'll get full pre-season, pretty much full pre-seasons under their belt, with obviously a steady increase in their load. So that's promising, because it means we get more players out on the track, and that's how you build durability. Training session after session, backing up week after week. Unfortunately, there's always a little bit of risk in that, but that's the risk you have to take to be able to get the playing group where you need them to be.
One thing that has remained stable under your leadership is stronger together, the ethos of the club, and that's not changing. But indulge me in some marketing chat, if you will. If that's the headline, what do you make of the subheading "No BS" as coined by Sam Walsh?
I love that. I love that. I actually said to him the other day, I said, mate, whether that was instinctive, deliberate or otherwise, but stronger together, no BS. I like that. It's simple and effective, and should be our catch cry going forward. So, look, I think I haven't asked Walshy this, but I do think what he was referring to is, let's worry about what we can control. Let's not worry about other things. What a program looks like, and just how do we get us right? What makes us play well. So another phrase has been coined is sort of like focus on what matters. So Walshy being able to say it in such a succinct way is a very effective way of being able to what we want to be about moving forward.
A few more to finish. It's been a big year for the footy club, and you as the senior coach have had to wear a fair bit of that in your role. Obviously, there was the announcement last month about the club committing to you as their man in 2026. But, mate, I guess, how are you after what's been a pretty big year?
I said it in one of my presses. It felt like the Truman Show that we're at one stage, like, man has coffee, man goes to work, man goes home, man comes back. It was quite strange. No, it was a hard year. It was a really hard year. Trying to navigate throughout the year with when sands are shifting is one of the more difficult things that you will do. What I will say is that you find out the true character of your football team through those periods of time, and while the results weren't going where we needed to, I think we found some gems throughout it, and people who really stood up through those periods of time, and that's pretty significant. But no, it was a tough year. It was a really hard year. Clearly, there's been a lot of commentary about us. What I'm really proud of throughout this whole time is that despite what was being said, despite how loud it actually got, we decided how we showed up. And it was on us and our choice on how we wanted to turn up every single day. And, as a repetition of that, towards the back end of the year, there was just this almost energy that was building within the building. And, I'm quite proud of that part. I'd like the results to be different. I'd like to be playing for another month. Clearly, that's where the best part of this year is all about. We're not. I hope that sits really deep within us, and it propels us into what we do next. But what I go forward with knowing is that there's a group there that's pretty determined to be able to turn this thing around, and we've got a clearer idea on what that looks like.
Cripper said on Monday that he kind of saw this shift in you, that like in the last 6 weeks felt like you were really enjoying your coaching. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, Ashton Moyer had me singing songs, and
really?
He's not bad on the guitar and the harmonica, and so I actually quite enjoyed that part of it. So just to sort of see the young fellas, imagine you can get energised by the younger guys. And mate, as tough as it was, I've got to admit, like that last 4 to 6 weeks, and seeing how the boys really sort of shifted the energy, and that's why I said, like what they did was like how we show up, and despite what was being talked about, they had each other and they lean on each other, and they come into the locker room and they chose what they wanted to be, and that is enormously hard to do. Like I said, there's courage in doing that, and people who are listening to this might like go, what do you mean by that? But to have that courage to sort of half begin again, and sort of like, okay, let's make this how we want it to be, and let's make this as noisy as we can on the inside about what we want to be, and that's what we did.
I use this term lightly, but what does the off season look like for an AFL senior coach?
Ooh, I don't know yet. I'm not going to divulge any of my off-season activities at this point in time. But look, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got some time in America that I'll actually I'll spend some time with my son over there, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'll have to find some point of relaxation somewhere. I just don't know where that looks like yet.
And yet your phone stays always on, I assume?
No, my phone will be going off at different times. So I find that's why it's good to leave the country, because people have got a strange way of knowing that you're just out of town and you're off on another side of the world. So it will involve being able to go to another country at some stage.
Nice. And just finally, I was hoping you could give us a Carlton Media exclusive. You've been asked this a few times this year and haven't budged, but I want to know this. Michael Voss, what's the name of your dog?
It's been almost asked at every single press conference. So I'm going to disclose it is Pippa. Pippa, yeah. So my little girl, she's doing very well too, by the way. So still in high training phase and not listening to me one bit. So loving it. So it's been good.
Breed for all those who aren't aware?
Border Collie. Yeah, always have Border Collies and Kelpies and active dogs. So active person, active dog.
Shout out to Pippa.
Shout out.
Thanks. Thank you, mate.
Cheers. No worries.